What happened to stealth in video games? I don't know about you guys, but recently, it's just not hit the same. And that's a shame because currently it's kind of been a monkey's paw situation when it comes to being a fan of these kinds of games. That's because, in a way, stealth mechanics are a bigger part of games than they ever have been previously. Most modern blockbusters will incorporate them into their gameplay in one way or another, with it being taken for granted that players will get the opportunity to sneak through at least some sections of the game undetected. Or at the very least, crouch walk slowly behind someone before bopping them on the head. Despite being everywhere though, stealth as an actual genre, not just a set of mechanics or a gameplay style, has pretty much evaporated from the AAA space. Instead, it's been replaced with a lot of games that do offer stealth as an option, but rarely make it the mechanical focus of the overall experience. While that in many ways has upped the bar of quality across the board, I mean, usually even the most half-baked stealth systems these days are more competent than the botched, inconsistent, and frustrating ones we used to get in action games a decade and a half ago. In my opinion, it has also led to stealth in games becoming stagnant, and more importantly, not as fun as it should be. And one major reason I think that stealth doesn't feel as rewarding as it should be is actually in the way that modern releases are built. See, crafting and RPG leveling mechanics are as common as stealth in modern action AAA games, with so much of the player's power progression coming from scouring and looting every enemy and environment for resources that you need. The focus on these systems, however, can lead to stealth being disincentivized at best and becoming the worst and least efficient way to play a game at worst. Take Star Wars Outlaws, for instance, one of the most stealth-focused blockbusters in recent memory. While I enjoyed my time with the game, and you can find a lot of those thoughts over on the What Culture Gaming podcast if you go and subscribe on the audio platforms, plug, it perfectly crystallized the friction between these two staples of modern games, and how a title's wider systems can make stealth an unappealing and unsatisfying option. The average combat encounter in Outlaws usually has you stealthily sneaking through an enemy base, taking out targets, and activating an objective somewhere in the environment. And while nothing particularly special, it does feel solid enough to do this, knocking out stormtroopers and charting your path from cover to cover. The issue is though, if you take the stealth seriously and try to ghost your way through encounters and not be seen, you're often actively punished for playing that style well. That's because in most of these areas there's a wealth of resources that you can find that'll help you craft better gear and new items. There's often hidden lore items, secondary objectives, and secrets that would be impossible to get without killing everyone in the base, so you can freely search an area. And even if these elements are minimal in an area, resources are so central to the game's mechanics that it feels actively wrong to just avoid them and sneak through undetected. Now, to Outlaws' credit, it doesn't work on a normal XP system, but in similar games you're often encouraged to engage with enemies as well rather than slip by, as eliminating them actually nets you XP that's important to the overall character progression, and you don't get the same, or sometimes you don't get any, from sneaking through somewhere. In order to maximize your rewards from any given mission then, or simply not miss out on any content, the game encourages you to play a very specific way, despite, on its surface, being quite freeform and optional in how you tackle any objective. The game says that sneaking is fine, but only to a point, and only if you're engaging in that silent predator, takedown heavy style of stealth that's become so associated with action games over the past decade. And this isn't too bad in some of the more linear missions that don't have open areas that you're encouraged to explore, but considering that this is an open world game with a whole host of optional areas, missions, and upgrade paths to further, ghosting through those can just make you feel like you're skipping content, missing out on interesting interactions or environments, or putting yourself at a disadvantage on the overall power curve. And yes, to be clear, it is a choice to decide to sneak through an area and not interact with looking for secrets or trying to pick up all the resources. That is definitely the player's choice and their prerogative. However, when choosing stealth actively hinders your placement on the power curve by offering you no bonuses to balance out what you would have got from shooting your way through encounters, that's when I think we have a more fundamental problem with how it feels to engage with stealth in an actual game. That's because all of the systems in Outlaws, and so many AAA games like it, tie into the player's resource and leveling progression first and foremost. It's a loop designed around making the numbers go up for 20 to 40 hours. You're playing to find enough resources to increase viability in combat, to unlock new weapons for your ship, and to activate new abilities that'll let you accumulate all of these resources faster and more efficiently. That is the loop. Stealth, however, is not about engaging necessarily, it's all about disengagement. And so, when the rewards don't factor in that playstyle and you aren't compensated for it, it can feel like you're constantly brushing up against the walls that the developers have thrown up in any given level. And that's never more clear in something like Outlaws, when the game just decides to throw your stealthy actions out the window and disregard them. And what I mean by that is, so many times in Outlaws you can play stealthily until the game arbitrarily decides that it's going to blow your cover because it needs to have an action sequence. The commitment to only allowing you to be stealthy to a point can often be seen in the level design as well, which only offers the illusion of being open-ended and player-directed, but is actually not really built fully for stealth gameplay. Like I said, it can kind of let you do it half-heartedly, but never fully commit to a proper stealth playthrough. So stealth in these games often feels like little more than a courtesy, something the games feel like they need to implement but don't really commit to or treat as a serious gameplay focus. And again, I know you can say that nobody is forcing you to play a specific way and you can just ignore the extra items in these areas and sneak through, but is it not a shame that by doing this, the game is actively making freeform stealth feel like the worst option in most scenarios? Apart from the missions that, of course, give you a fail state for being seen by an enemy, most situations in games like this kind of benefit from the player just going guns out, taking out every enemy in a room so they can freely mine their resources or get the max amount of experience or check every nook and cranny for something that they might miss but might be integral either to the other gameplay systems in the game or the player's own character progression. Going in guns blazing will guarantee you the maximum amount of XP and every resource in the area, and if you decide to do that same encounter stealthily, you'll get personal satisfaction, maybe a bigger uphill battle to fight in the next encounter because you might end up underleveled or losing out on some of those resources that you need. And I think this imbalance just makes stealth it's there if you want it option. It's not that it's outright bad, but it is boring, especially when you throw in the quality of the actual stealth mechanics themselves. In Outlaws, again, stealth pretty much functions the exact same way it has done in Ubisoft games since Far Cry 3. You're encouraged to stake out the location, tag enemies, and plan your entrance. Then you slowly crouch behind an enemy and press the action button to perform a basic canned takedown that you'll definitely get sick of, by the way, or just use an insta-kill ability. In between all that, you have your basic arsenal to confuse or distract enemies, you know, smoke grenades, hackable objects, whistling. You'll notice I didn't do an actual whistle because I don't know how to whistle. Close enough. Now, Outlaws does admittedly have more novel twists on these mechanics, such as your alien pet nicks or smooth talking your way out of being instantly shot, but for the most part, successful stealth gameplay in Outlaws looks the same 1 hour in as it does 40 hours in. The game doesn't encourage you to change your behavior because it's instantly viable, and in my opinion, that kind of makes everything just sort of boring and bland and the same. And the only reason I'm banging on about all of this stuff right now is because I genuinely think that stealth deserves way more than the attention it's currently receiving in the AAA space. When Far Cry 3 allowed you to scope out enemy encampments, mark soldiers, and encouraged you to plan your route before taking people out with silenced weapons and violent takedowns, it felt like a huge innovation in the action stealth genre. Unfortunately though, we've pretty much been doing this exact thing in action games with little variation since, and even worse, that staleness has been compounded with what I mentioned before, that disincentivization of stealth as an efficient playstyle for those wanting to maximize their stats or see the entirety of a game world. And though I am ragging on stealth specifically, I do have to concede that it's not just stealth that has been treated this way in AAA games. Most modern games try to be a little bit of everything, in turn rarely doing any one thing truly great. These genre blends have always had their place, and don't get me wrong, they can be hugely enjoyable. But unlike shooters, races, fighting games, etc., stealth as a standalone genre has pretty much vanished from the AAA space. So it stings even more that all stealth heads have to enjoy is this watered down version of it. And look, I'm not a developer, I don't know how to fix the problem, or if you guys even think this is a problem, but I do think if you stack games within a franchise side by side across the past 10 years or so, you can see the stealth mechanics just either stagnating or being worse than they were in those earlier installments. Just look at Arkham to Gotham Knights, or Far Cry 3 to Far Cry 6, Skyrim to Starfield, Assassin's Creed 3 to Assassin's Creed Mirage. And where stealth is at in games right now, I think makes it such a shame that despite everything that I've criticized here, despite it being unimaginative, despite all of its shortfalls, I personally have championed Star Wars Outlaws as a return to form for the stealth genre in the AAA space, just because it did the bare minimum and put a slightly bigger focus on stealth as part of its gameplay. And I think for as much as I love that game, we deserve a little bit more. So that's my editorial on where I'm perceiving stealth to be in the games industry right now. I genuinely want to know if you've got any examples of AAA stealth games that I'm just completely missing, or any games that are blending different genres but are putting a heavier emphasis on stealth, or at least rectifying some of the issues that I've got with it in this video essay. But until next time, I have been Josh. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I promise the next one from me is going to be way more positive than this. But until that one, I'll see you later.